Okay, so I want to take some time to dive more deeply into what's expected for the peer review annotations and letters. And first of all, in order to get to the assignment, you navigate down the Canvas page to week 6, peer review annotations and letters. Click here, and you'll find a link to the Word doc with the assignment sheet. So I'm going to open that up. Make the font bigger for the sake of this exercise. And here you'll see a description of what all you have to do. So this is a assignment that basically has two parts. The first part is doing annotations as you're reading your peers' essays. So the second part is going to be the actual peer review letter. So let's start with the annotations. First of all, you want to read your peer's letter carefully. And as you're reading, you want to underline and label at least one place in the introduction where you see the writer situating their essay in the broader conversation on their topic, i.e. using a they say. Then you want to be sure to underline the essay's thesis. And then as you read the body paragraphs, underline and label what you consider to be the main point of each body paragraph. So think back on that paragraphing handout you all read the week before last, and the discussion we had in class about how to structure a paragraph. Find the main point of each paragraph. And if you're struggling to do this, maybe you're confused about the assignment, but it also might be that the person whose essay you're reading has not organized their essay in such a way that it's clear why each paragraph is a paragraph and what the point of each paragraph is. So if you're unable to find the main point, that's useful information to share with the person whose essay you're reading. If you're unable to find evidence that supports the main point, that's also super useful information to share, because in order for that paragraph to be successful, the person who wrote the essay is going to have to go back and add evidence in to support that point. Okay, so before I talk about the letter, I want to walk you all through some examples of past essays and how you might go about annotating them. Okay, so here we have an essay with by a past student, an English 125 student from a CSP course. So you'll notice right away that she starts off her introduction with a very compelling, haunting analogy about John Henry that she uses to explain the burdens, the extra burdens that students of color often face in predominantly white institutions. So as far as a narrative hook, she's done like a stellar job of dramatically, compellingly drawing us into the essay. By the way, I will post all of these essays that I cover right now as examples in the file section, and I'll also link to them from the assignment sheet. Okay, so moving down, here we see Cassie, the writer, engaging with an opposing viewpoint, so finding a they say, I say, and then using that to segue into her thesis. So here she writes, researchers have documented that Black students draw on quote-unquote grit, mental toughness, and perseverance to achieve in predominantly white academic institutions. But a new Vanderbilt study says that that notion fails to recognize an emerging mental health crisis for these students. So in this essay, Cassie is pushing back against the idea of grit and the notion that all that's needed to succeed academically is mental toughness and perseverance. She's making the point that if you rely completely on grit and ignore other factors, that you run a risk of putting your mental health at risk as a student of color. So here's her thesis. I went ahead and labeled that, and in my letter I might also want to reflect on whether this thesis is effective or not, whether it is a true thesis that meets the qualifications for a strong argumentative thesis like we talked about. But for now, reading, I'm just going to move on to her first body paragraph. So here's her topic sentence. I was and still am a product of this thinking process like many others. It could be a little bit more clear, but what she's referring to is this thought process that led her to feel like she had to go above and beyond in everything in order to compensate for the disadvantages that she was facing. So then here we see her main idea. She then goes on to provide evidence for that main idea. Okay, now let's move on to a different essay by a former student about politics and sports. So early on in his introduction, we see him engaging with an opposing viewpoint or using the they say, I say move. Here in the beginning of the essay, he says, on the other side of the argument, people say they should be kept separate, politics and sports that is, because political demonstrations are unpatriotic, discourteous to veterans, and they destroy the entertainment aspect of sports. Okay, so moving down, we see he has a clear thesis here. Given the political climate of sports, it would be disingenuous to suggest that athletes should be apolitical. Political and social activism should be allowed in professional sports because athletes have traditionally possessed the moral authority to leverage their platform to rectify social injustices. Okay, so a clear thesis. And then we move on to his first body paragraph. So the first sentence is clearly the main idea. There's a long and rich history of athletes using their platforms to highlight social issues. So immediately we know that he's going to use historical evidence in this paragraph to make his point about political activism in sports. So he's got a good main idea. Does he back it up with evidence? Well, pretty early on we see that he does use a lot of really strong evidence, including some evidence that goes all the way back to 532 AD in Constantinople when a protest occurred that was related to sports. So he's got a main idea and evidence supporting that idea. Now, doing annotations, I continue reading this paragraph and then move on to the next. Okay, so now on to the second part of this assignment, the actual letter. For your peer review letter, you should write at least 100 thoughtful, useful words about your peer's essay and how they can improve it. If you write just 100 words, they better be clear, useful words. Don't just BS for 100 words. Here are some questions, issues you might want to address in your peer review letter. You may not have time to address all of them. You probably won't. That's fine. Just make sure that you give substantive feedback that's based off of these questions. So 1, narrative hook. Did it draw you in? Was it successful? Was there a narrative hook? 2, the thesis. So were you able to find a thesis, first of all? Second of all, did it have the qualities of a strong argumentative thesis? Okay, C. Think about the big picture or global organization of the essay. Did it make sense? Did the paragraphs flow into each other? Did they all support the thesis? Did they all have main ideas? Okay, that brings us to the local level of organization. Did each paragraph make sense? Was it clear why the information in each paragraph belonged there? Did all of the information included connect to a main point that the author was making? Finally, think about the conclusion. So in this assignment, this particular assignment, one thing that's important to look for is whether the writer provides solutions. So they should go beyond just restating their thesis and take a broader view of their issue and try to present concrete solutions that might help us work towards a better future. And that's basically it. One last thing, when you come to the mini workshops that we're going to have on Sunday or Monday, hopefully, be sure that you come with an open mind as a writer and a real desire to help your peers improve their essays and their ideas as someone giving feedback. When you're giving feedback, it really is a good idea to start with the biggest picture concerns. So there's no point in quibbling about commas or grammar or punctuation if an entire paragraph of the essay needs to be completely redone, or if the entire essay needs to be restructured. So start with the big picture stuff, the stuff that matters the most. Secondly, be specific. So don't just say there's a lot of evidence here. Say there was a lot of strong evidence. In particular, I found this line to be very effective. Or if you felt like there was a point where the evidence was particularly weak. Give a specific example of that. Be kind, but also do your best to be helpful. And that's about it.